in Israel as a key minister steps down after clashing with Benjamin Netanyahu over post-war plans. The Prime Minister accuses the opposition of walking away from climate action over its pledge to scrap Australia's 2030 emissions target. Shoppers urge not to stockpile eggs as a major supermarket restricts purchases as Victoria battles an outbreak of bird flu.
If people just buy what they need, there should be a good supply over the next 6 to 12 months.
And Australians who contributed to the COVID pandemic response, among those recognised in the King's birthday honours. Hello, welcome to ABC News. I'm Lorna Dunkley. Israeli Minister Benny Gantz has resigned from Benjamin Netanyahu's emergency government, despite pleas from the Prime Minister not to abandon the coalition. His departure had been expected after he presented Mr Netanyahu with a June 8th deadline to come up with a clear exit strategy for the war in Gaza. Mr Gantz has repeatedly clashed with Mr Netanyahu over post-war plans for the region and has called on the Prime Minister to set a date for elections. Polls have shown Benny Gantz to be the most formidable political rival to Mr Netanyahu, whose popularity has wavered in the aftermath of the October 7th attacks. In a televised address, Mr Gantz said he could not support the Israeli leader any longer.
Regrettably, Netanyahu is preventing us from advancing toward true victory, which is the justification for the ongoing and painful cost of war. That is why we are leaving the emergency government today with a heavy heart but with full confidence.
Middle East correspondent Alison Horn has more from Jerusalem.
Although this won't topple the Netanyahu government, it is still highly significant because Benny Gantz was brought into this emergency coalition in a sign of unity, to be a more centrist voice in what is Israel's most right-wing government ever. He was given a position on the war cabinet, which meant he was involved in critical decisions being made about Israel's movements inside Gaza and the trajectory of this war. Given his departure now and his choice to quit this government, it now leaves open spots on this war cabinet that will need to be filled. And already the most extremist and right-wing members of the coalition have expressed their desire to fill these war cabinet spots. These are members of the coalition who want the war to continue, who want Israel to completely occupy Gaza. They want Israeli settlers to return to Gaza. They want full control over Gaza, over the territory, over the movement of Gazans and Palestinians there. And these are the people that Netanyahu will now have to choose from to put onto this war cabinet. So it means that it's likely the decision makers around this war and what's going to happen at this war will be more right-wing than we have had on the war cabinet over the last 8 months. And it also means now that there'll probably be added pressure on the United States, because previously when Benny Gantz was on the war cabinet, the US knew that there was this more moderate, centrist right character that was advancing what the US has been trying to put forward as its desire for the war throughout the last 8 months. That is now gone, so the US is probably going to have to take a more active role in trying to moderate the trajectory of this war and even pushing for a ceasefire.
What do you think, Alison, the Israeli people will make of Benjamin Netanyahu being so reliant on the hard right?
Well, a lot of people here think he's put himself in this position. He made a coalition with these far-right members, knowing that his ability to stay in power was dependent on them. He's given them, for example, one person, Itamar Ben-Gvir, he's given them enormous power. Itamar Ben-Gvir is now the National Security Minister. So he hasn't put these people into the background. He's elevated them to the top of the ranks within the Netanyahu government. And he's now in a position where if he goes against the wishes of these right-wing members, they could bring down the government. Indeed, they've already threatened that. They have said that if Netanyahu goes forward with a ceasefire and hostage release deal, such as one that has been presented by the United States in the last few weeks, that they will quit the government. This would mean the end of the Netanyahu coalition. This would mean the end of his term as Prime Minister. This would mean the end, perhaps, of his long-running political legacy here. And it would also mean that he would then have to answer questions about his involvement in October 7, what he knew, what he didn't know, which up until this point have not been answered, because he has said the priority for him at the moment is continuing to focus on the operations of the war. And he said, I'll deal with those questions about October 7 later. If the government topples, he's then got to answer those questions. New elections would be called. There would probably be a new Prime Minister. So there are massive implications for Benjamin Netanyahu now going forward. There is some suggestion he won't put members like Itamar Ben-Gvir into this war cabinet, but he doesn't have a big pool of people to choose from, and certainly anyone that he chooses will be considered more right-wing than someone like Benny Gantz.
Alison, it was a very dramatic and deadly weekend in Gaza. What's been the fallout then from the Israeli hostage raid that Hamas claims killed more than 270 Palestinians?
Yeah, I've been speaking with people inside Gaza, and they've expressed to me this just deep sense of shock and disbelief at what happened over the weekend. Israel says it used a series of airstrikes and on-the-ground fire as cover to rescue these four hostages, the four that were taken from the Nova Music Festival on October 7 and had been held in captivity for about 246 days. During that operation, though, many Palestinians were killed. As you said, Hamas says it's about 274. Israel has disputed those numbers and says that a number of militants would be included in the death toll. But I've been speaking with people and hearing horrific testimonies of young children that have been killed. I've been seeing this horrific graphic vision of many children being either taken to be buried or taken with extremely severe injuries, life-threatening injuries that they probably won't survive to hospital. And Palestinian activists are questioning how is it appropriate that to save 4 Israeli lives, Israel can kill what Hamas says is more than 250 Palestinians. Here in Israel, this is being seen as a massive success. It's being hailed as a heroic operation, certainly. Just on the facts alone, this is the largest and most successful hostage rescue to date, over 8 months. 4 hostages is the largest number that Israel has been able to rescue since the start of this war. But Arab countries around here are questioning Israel for its tactics. Some of them are labelling this a massacre, which Israel has denied. And they've called on the UN Security Council to intervene in pushing forward both a ceasefire and a call for Israel to stop using aerial bombardments in Gaza.
Alison Horn there. The Prime Minister has accused the opposition of walking away from the Paris Climate Agreement. But the coalition's energy spokesperson claims Australia will breach the treaty regardless of who is in power. Political reporter Evelyn Manfield has more from Parliament House.
Prime Minister Anthony Albanese said this morning that he's very confident Australia will meet the Paris Agreement and that, in fact, Australia must meet the Paris Agreement. So we're talking about here the target to cut emissions by 43% by the end of the decade on 2005 levels. Now, the reason the Prime Minister has been speaking about this today is because the coalition came out on the weekend and said that that target won't be met and suggested that a future coalition government would dump that target, something the Prime Minister has been very critical of.
Peter Dutton is walking away from climate action. His decision to abandon the 2030 target means him walking away from the Paris Accord. If you walk away from the Paris Accord, you'll be standing with Libya, Yemen and Iran and against all of our major trading partners and all of our important allies.
The Independent Climate Change Authority said last year that Australia wasn't on track to meet this target, and in fact emissions actually rose to June last year. But analysis from the Energy Department suggests that Australia is within striking distance of getting to that target. That's what the government says, that the projections by 2030 are to cut emissions by 42% when the target is that 43%. Now, as for the coalition, for what targets a future potential coalition government would set, we don't know. The Shadow Energy Minister, Ted O'Brien, insisted this morning that a coalition government would set new targets and that it would still meet net zero by 2050. Take a listen.
We are absolutely committed to the Paris Agreement. We are absolutely committed to achieving net zero by 2050, and we will have a plan to do so. What we have done is we've called Labor out. Labor legislated for a 43% emissions reduction cut by 2030. They have Buckley's chance of achieving that.
Now, we know that the coalition, if it wins government, wants nuclear energy to be part of the energy mix, and Ted O'Brien was asked this morning about the costings and locations of nuclear reactors. He said that would be released in due course. But all of this really points to the fact that climate and energy are shaping up to be two big topics ahead of a federal election.
Coles has capped the amount of eggs customers can buy as a bird flu outbreak spreads at poultry farms in Victoria. A temporary limit of 2 cartons per customer will apply at stores around the country, except in WA. More than 500,000 chickens have been culled after a highly pathogenic strain of avian flu was detected on 5 farms in the state's southwest. Victorian egg farmer Brian Ahmed says shortages may not begin to ease until next year.
Chickens aren't like machines. We can't just switch them on and off. To lose that many birds, it'll take 6 to 12 months at least before we can recoup those bird numbers again. So when you say there's a shortage, just if no one panic buys, our birds that are in the system will continue to lay each day. The only thing is we can't tell them all to lay more eggs today because there's a bigger demand. But if people just buy what they need, there should be a good supply over the next 6 to 12 months as well. Maybe not as much as normal, but there'll be enough for people to get by.
The wife of British TV presenter Michael Mosley says it's devastating to have lost him after his body was found on the Greek island of Symi. New details have emerged about his final movements, with a TV cameraman capturing the moment he made the tragic discovery.
It was a Greek TV crew filming the island of Symi from on board a boat that spotted a figure on a rocky hill.
And you can clearly see there is a man lying down with his hand on his belly, a watch, and on his other hand he has his bag.
After 4 days of searching by air, land and sea for Dr. Michael Mosley, a grim discovery.
I'm really sorry for the family. I'm sorry that I'm the one who found him. Sorry.
A statement from his wife, Dr. Claire Bailey Mosley, confirming the worst. It is devastating to have lost Michael, my wonderful, funny, kind and brilliant husband. He did an incredible climb, took the wrong route and collapsed. We're taking comfort in the fact that he so very nearly made it. He was found metres from Agia Marina Beach, around an area where search and rescue teams, locals and tourists alike, had been scouring. Police believe he had been dead for a number of days. Michael Mosley left his wife from St Nicholas Beach, setting off for a walk, but never returned. 20 minutes later, he was spotted on CCTV in the nearby town of Pedi. He was then seen again at the marina, heading northeast. The diet doctor is being remembered as a loving man.
People will remember him, people will smile. Anyone who met Mike will always smile because he was such a loving, kind, generous person.
Now, the diet I'm about to go on...
Following a diabetes diagnosis, Michael Mosley popularised intermittent fasting with his 5-2 diet.
And it's also good for my heart and lungs.
But he was best known for entertaining audiences and inspiring people to live a happier and healthier life.
The number of people who queue up at his events, not to get signed copies of his books, but to say thank you, I followed your advice and it made a huge difference to me.
The body of the 67-year-old has been transferred to the neighbouring island of Rhodes, with a coroner to determine the exact cause of his death. A tragic end for his 4 children and wife of more than 35 years and the thousands of people whose lives he changed. Rani Heyman, ABC News.
Gains by far-right parties in EU elections have prompted a bruised French President Emmanuel Macron to call a snap national election in what's being viewed as a gamble to re-establish his authority. Macron labelled the rise of nationalism a danger to Europe.
A resounding vote in favour of the far right in France. In a high-risk gamble that could see his party humbled again, Emmanuel Macron has dissolved the French Parliament and called a snap election for just weeks before the Paris Olympics.
This is a situation that I cannot come to terms with. The rise of nationalists, of demagogues, is a danger for our nation.
Far-right opposition leader Marine Le Pen celebrating her party's surge at the ballot box. She's the big winner today and could well repeat that success in a few weeks.
We are ready to exercise power if the French place their trust in us during the future legislative elections.
But signs that Le Pen's success has also re-energised her opponents, hundreds protesting her party's result in central Paris.
I think there's generally a feeling of disquiet and of sadness at the results of this vote here.
In the last French election 2 years ago, Emmanuel Macron retained government with almost 60% of the vote. But these European elections appear to show that support for the far-right opposition in France has since grown.
The far right also doing well in other major European countries. They made big gains in Germany and Spain too. But that wasn't true everywhere, the political centre maintaining its majority in the EU Parliament.
Together with others, we will build a bastion against the extremes from the left and from the right. We will stop them.
The elections determine the makeup of European Parliament for the next 5 years, and the far right's increased number of seats could make it harder to agree on policies for nearly 500 million Europeans. Michelle Rimmer, ABC News.
Well, let's talk about this further. Joining me from Brussels is Associate Editor at Politico Europe, Suzanne Lynch. Suzanne, hi there. Just how much of a gamble is this for Macron? I mean, how much support does he have domestically?
It's a big gamble. I mean, people were very, very shocked here when this news emerged last night. And it's specifically, his reason is because his party was trounced in the European elections. Marine Le Pen's National Rally Party got double the vote that Macron's own party got in these elections. Now, this has been well flagged by polls, and the National Rally Party have traditionally done well in European elections, but Macron has decided to basically call the French electorate's bluff and say, put it to them, yes, you have voted for the right-wing party in this European election. Are you prepared to do that in national elections? So the French are going to go to the polls in the next few weeks. And traditionally in French politics, the bigger parties have kind of come together to stop the Marine Le Pen parties from taking power in France. Now, whether this will happen in a few weeks remains to be seen, because the National Rally has been more popular than it has ever been before. It has kind of moved to the centre slightly on some issues. Marine Le Pen is presenting herself as a more responsible leader, where once, for example, she advocated leaving the EU. That's not what she wants to do anymore. She knows her voters aren't there at that point, but she is very Euro-critical. So it's a big gamble by Macron, but he is hoping that if the National Rally doesn't do as well as it has done last night, that will take the wind out of its sails ahead of the more important presidential election that will take place in 2027.
It's not a new phenomenon, Suzanne, is it? The far right gaining support right across Europe.
Yeah. Look, there's always been a paradox here that the European Parliament elections, which are seen as kind of a second-tier election by many people across Europe, tend to send politicians that can be anti-EU, where you have voters who would vote for certain politicians that they might not vote in their own general elections. They're happy to vote for them in the European Parliament elections. So over the years, we've had people like Nigel Farage, who was an extremely anti-EU figure, who won a seat in the European Parliament. However, the facts are that the right-wing parties and far-right parties have done better this time. And in particular, they've done better in the big countries. Germany, France and Italy. They have seen a surge, really, in support for far-right parties. For example, take Germany, the largest country in the EU. The Alternative for Deutschland, which is a far-right party, it finished second in the polls. And the coalition government in Germany, which is led by the Chancellor Olaf Scholz, they were trounced by the electorate. So Scholz's own party came behind the Alternative for Deutschland. Obviously, in a country like Germany, given its history, this is very worrying for a lot of people, that this far-right party did so well in these elections. But in many ways, it can be read perhaps as a message to the governing parties, rather than a sense that this AfD party is really going to emerge as a serious political force domestically in Germany.
It certainly is causing an earthquake, though, across Europe, because I see that Belgium is headed for a new government, as their PM says he's going to resign.
Yeah, there were tears last night as the Prime Minister, Alexander De Croo, announced his resignation. Now, Belgium was slightly different in that it also held national elections. So his party did very, very poorly. Alexander De Croo, he's coming from more of a left-wing party. And instead, Flemish nationalists topped the poll here. Belgium has got a very complex system, and some of the parties at the best actually are advocating for the breakup of Belgium. They believe Flanders should be an independent entity. Now, what will happen here is that Belgium always has a very complex government formation system. It can take over a year to form a government. So De Croo will stay in place on a caretaker basis for months. It could even be a year, until Belgian politicians are able to hammer out some kind of a coalition deal. But yes, again, in Belgium, there was a win for a right-wing party, although a even further right party here in Belgium was pipped to the post by the more traditional far-right party here. But yes, it is part of that trend, that definite shift to the right that we've seen throughout the continent here overnight.
I wonder if it's a reflection somewhat on the EU Parliament and what it does and how successfully it does it.
Yeah, look, within the EU system, the European Parliament, which has 720 MEPs, is often seen as the least important part of the EU. You've got different strands within the EU: the European Commission, that's headed by Ursula von der Leyen, the European Council and the European Parliament. Now, in recent years, the European Parliament has been gaining more power, so it does have a lot of power to shape legislation. But ultimately, the European Commission and the European Council, I think it's fair to say, have got more power. So what's interesting now in the next couple of days is that these elections that have just happened, that's going to trigger another process, which is a race for the top jobs. Who's going to head up the European Commission and the European Council and a few other top European jobs. So von der Leyen, the president of the European Commission, who's probably the best known figure in EU politics, she wants another 5 years at the helm of the European Commission. And her political group did quite well in the elections, but she doesn't have the numbers to get over the line. She needs a majority of MEPs to back her. The numbers are suggesting she might not have that. So she may need to do a deal with these resurgent right-wing parties in the Parliament, including the Italian Prime Minister, Giorgia Meloni, who's emerging as a very powerful figure in Europe. So von der Leyen wants another 5 years at the helm of the European Commission, but now over the next few weeks, discussions and negotiations behind the scenes are going to start about whether she has the votes, whether she has the support, and whether she's prepared to give some concessions to the right as she tries to get support for another 5 years at the helm of the European Commission.
All right, Suzanne, let's end where we began in France. What's the time frame and how quickly do France do elections? June 30th for the first poll.
Very, very quick. I mean, we've got elections obviously in Britain, Rishi Sunak calling that snap elections, and now ones in France. One thing to note is that this system, the electoral system, is different for these parliamentary elections in France than it was for the European elections that took place last night. So again, that's one reason why Marine Le Pen's party may not do as well in the national elections. But yes, as you say, the first round by the end of this month. The big question for Marine Le Pen is she ready for this? She was taken by surprise. She's got to get her candidates out. One person to keep an eye on is this wonder kid of European politics, Jordan Bardella, who Marine Le Pen put at the top of the list for her party in the European elections. He's only 28 years old. He's a right-wing politician, but he's got a huge following, for example, on TikTok and other social media platforms. And he seems to have connected with the youth vote in France. So that's a worry for Macron and his centrist politicians. Are they misreading the mood in France? Macron really believes that the centre will hold in France, that the French electorate don't really want to elect Marine Le Pen into any real position of power. But it's going to be proven now in the next few weeks. Maybe he's misreading the mood, that actually that younger generation and vast swathes of France, particularly in the countryside, do now vote for the National Rally, Marine Le Pen's party, which, as I say, has become more sanitised in the last few years. It is not as provocative as it once was. So this is his gamble. Let's see how it works out in the next few weeks. But possibly we could have a right-wing prime minister in France by the time the Olympics starts in a few weeks.
Wow, an interesting prospect. Suzanne Lynch from Politico Europe, thank you. Now back home, from artists and sporting legends to public servants and swimming teachers. More than 700 people have been recognised for their service in this year's King's Honours List. For the fourth year in a row, pandemic leaders have been given a nod. Victoria Pengilly reports.
Their skills vary, but these Australians are truly remarkable. Among those recognised in this year's King's Honours, Gamilaroi chef Auntie Beryl Van Oplu from Redfern in Sydney. A culinary master, her knowledge of native bush tucker is used across the world.
I'm 81 now, and I think it's a great honour to have that, and the people that have nominated me, I thank them very much.
More than 700 people were honoured on this year's roll, including Perth youth worker Pat Ryan, who's helping young people heal by putting wheels in motion.
We aim to dismantle young people's disadvantage so that they can pursue a future with hope.
6 Australians were awarded the top honour, the Companion of the Order of Australia, including incoming Governor-General Samantha Mostyn. Former COVID-era Labor Premiers Mark McGowan and Daniel Andrews also given the nod for their leadership, as well as this South Australian epidemiologist for her work improving vaccination rates in remote communities.
I'm thrilled that public health has also been recognised. Normally we're behind the scenes. Nobody knows who we are. Good public health means you shouldn't notice us.
In Queensland, rock legend and former Powderfinger player John Collins is being recognised for his work offstage, supporting struggling artists.
Hey, mate.
How are you?
Good, how are you? The costs have gone through the roof for smaller venues. That sort of natural progression from people going to see young artists was broken through COVID, and I don't think it's come back yet.
There's also Professor Thea Brown for her groundbreaking research into children murdered by their parents.
You hope that eventually you can make some impact, and what really drives you
is the terrible fate that awaits some children.
Darwin swim teacher Donna Roussos offers swimming lessons to children with a disability.
We recognised there was a real need for kids with disabilities who couldn't fit into a mainstream program because of their needs.
For the family of former AFL football legend John Devine, pride and sadness at his posthumous award.
He really valued the contribution he made to the people that he coached. And I know he took a lot of pride in seeing those people turn into successful people in the community, and hopefully he had a little bit of a role to play in that.
From quiet achievers like women's community organiser Margaret Finlaker-Smith.
You do things not to get rewards or to get recognised. You do it because you want to, you feel strongly about it.
To big personalities like comedian Hamish Blake, children's entertainer Jimmy Giggle, and cricket great Glenn McGrath.
Had a pat on the back.
There's a raft of homegrown talent. Victoria Pengilly, ABC News.
The top stories this hour on ABC News. Health authorities in Gaza say the number of Palestinians killed in Israel's operation to rescue 4 hostages has now risen to 274. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has described the operation as heroic. It comes as Israeli War Cabinet Minister Benny Gantz resigned, accusing Benjamin Netanyahu of mismanaging the war effort in Gaza. The Prime Minister's accused the opposition of walking away from climate action over its pledge to scrap the 2030 emissions target. Opposition leader Peter Dutton says Australia is not on track to deliver on its 43% reduction target under the Paris Agreement. But Anthony Albanese says he is confident Australia will reach the target. Coles is putting a restriction on the number of eggs people can buy as Victoria battles bird flu at multiple poultry farms. Thousands of chickens have been killed and quarantine zones have been put in place at 5 infected farms in the southwest. Customers are now only able to buy 2 dozen eggs at a time to avoid a shortage. And 737 Australians have been recognised in the King's Birthday Honours List for their achievements and contributions to society. Former state premiers Daniel Andrews and Mark McGowan are among 6 Australians awarded the highest honour, the Companion of the Order of Australia. Health officials and insiders are claiming the Northern Territory's main hospital, Royal Darwin, is reaching a tipping point, citing budget blowouts, a lack of beds and huge staff turnover. They're warning of dire consequences if things don't change soon. Jack Hislop has this special report for Stateline NT.
A hospital on the brink. At the end of the day, something has to give. We can't keep doing this forever. The Northern Territory's biggest and busiest health facility in its own emergency.
We're working under an emergency management type of condition. You could call it even disaster services when you're actually going above and beyond what you actually prepare to do on a normal basis.
Inside the hospital walls, a nightmare is playing out for some patients.
We didn't sleep for 2 days.
Disability pensioner Deb Jones was recently admitted to Royal Darwin's emergency ward in severe pain from a chronic health condition. She became one of many sharing a single cubicle with another patient, a problem known as double bunking.
It's horrible because you're having this personal conversation about your personal health and your personal issues, and someone else is listening to what's going on. And it's just total invasion of privacy.
It's not just patients feeling the crush. An internal emergency warning system called a code yellow is triggered when the hospital is too stretched to deliver normal services. Royal Darwin's first ever code yellow was called in 2018. Last financial year, there were 18 of them. Truth is that we've normalised disaster. The code yellows, whether it's in code yellow or not code yellow, either way, the hospital is still full. Health officials say the main cause of a code yellow is demand and a lack of beds to cope. On any given day, up to 70 beds are taken by aged care patients with nowhere else to go.
Ultimately, underfunding of aged care is the biggest single factor facing the Northern Territory for our issues with overcrowding and access block.
Patients requiring elective surgeries are paying the price.
I have never been able to get a date. It just keeps getting pushed out and pushed out and pushed out.
Last financial year, the average overdue wait time for elective surgeries in the NT was 391 days, the longest of any jurisdiction. Just 68% of patients were admitted within the clinically recommended time frame.
That has been one of the mitigation strategies that we put in place. We rationalize elective surgery. That gives us access to 8 or 12 beds in that particular day.
Exacerbating services, the Northern Territory has some of the worst health outcomes in the country, due largely to high chronic disease rates in remote Indigenous communities. Aboriginal primary healthcare providers are trying to help prevent hospital admissions, but they too are struggling under the load.
At the moment it takes 2 to 3 weeks for a client to be able to get an appointment with one of our GPs. So that just goes to show the sort of pressure that our clinics are under right now.
Danila Dilba caters to Indigenous people in Greater Darwin, but its chief executive says it's underfunded by $60 million a year, putting the pressure back on Royal Darwin.
The system is designed for all parts of it to be working well, and I think when you see hospitals overloaded, it's a signal that the whole of the system's not working.
NT Health also faces huge challenges from high staff turnover. With the reliance on locum nurses and doctors, the department has overspent its budget every year since 2016, including a $200 million blowout this financial year.
The more we look into this, the more we realise that there is not a magic bullet or a simple solution to a very complex problem.
The NT government says it's rallying the Commonwealth to provide more money to help heal an ailing system from its chronic condition. Jack Hislop, ABC News, Darwin.
Returning now to the King's Honours list here in Australia, Emeritus Professor Thea Brown has been appointed a member of the Order of Australia for her significant work in social welfare, particularly through family violence and child protection research. She's led 2 of the country's most comprehensive studies into filicide and says she wishes more people knew about the issue, which she became aware of while working at the family court.
I had been doing a lot of research relating to parental separation and the family court, and I had noticed that they were categorising children as being abused who, in my opinion, weren't being abused. Actually, their parents, in my opinion, were trying to murder them, and in one case, the father was charged with attempted murder, and I thought, I had not really understood this was a possibility for a child, that they would be so badly treated that this could happen. So we began looking at filicide in Victoria and found that, to our great surprise, there was very little known about it. And so we set up a big study, beginning with Victoria, and then went on to a national study. And we found that, on average, one child dies around every fortnight at the hands of one or other of their parents or step-parents. So having established that, we went on to do a lot of research looking at who were the perpetrators, why did this happen, what were the causes that led to it, and we have just finished a big study, again on Victoria, looking at the notion of what you might call red flag risks, showing the kind of factors that you could call risks and showing that the risks are constellations of risks. There's not just one risk. It's got to be a number of things happening at the one time that leads to or triggers the filicide.
Thea Brown there, who's been appointed a member of the Order of Australia. New research has found while baby boomers want to help their children out financially, most aren't willing to dip into their retirement savings to do so. A survey by wealth manager AMP found most Australians over 65 believe their kids have it tougher than they did at their age. Most agreed it was important to pass on their wealth, but were worried about how it would affect their lifestyle as they grow old. AMP researcher Ben Hillier says some parents are overly cautious of overspending their super funds.
We know very clearly from the research that retirees see their superannuation, for example, as primarily designed to fund their own retirement. And they don't generally have strong bequest motives for their superannuation, but because of the fear of running out, they're actually underspending their superannuation on average. That's a big generalisation, I know, and some people do certainly consume all their superannuation, but on average, Australians draw the very bare minimum from their superannuation, which means they're actually inadvertently leaving quite large bequests. Unfortunately, the vast majority of wealth transfer that happens is in the form of an inheritance, and that's going to the over 50s typically. Those who are approaching retirement or even in retirement themselves. The inheritances aren't being received by the younger generation when it's most needed, when they're raising young families, when they're trying to break into the housing market.
For many farmers, agri-tourism can create opportunities to expand, diversify and even save their business. The industry is expected to be worth over $18 billion by 2030. But many say red tape and outdated regulations make it difficult to navigate and are pushing for change. Bronwyn Neindorf runs a fourth-generation family-owned farm and is part of a newly launched peak body called Agri-tourism Queensland. She says the future of farming was looking bleak before she decided to take a new route.
When the next generation was coming through in our farm, our children were coming through, we just couldn't see any future for them on the farm, and battling droughts and you battle floods. So we wanted to see them do something different. We want to be able to have our children come back onto the farm and not struggle like we have over these years and trying to ride that wave of cash flow. So we looked seriously at how we could diversify our farm and what we could do to build our farm and make it better and leave it in a better place than when we started. And that's when we started looking around. We actually had some Israeli businessmen come and talk to us about aquaculture, and we went over to Israel in 2009 and had a look at what they did over there, and that was the first part of what we were doing. So we came back home and we put it together and started aquaculture on the farm.
Okay, but you didn't stop there, did you?
No, we didn't. Actually, my husband's told me I'm not allowed to watch Landline anymore because when I said to him I wanted to do camels, they said, that's it, you're not allowed to watch it anymore. He said, no more animals or it's a divorce.
What do you do now as well as the aquaculture?
Yeah, so we do aquaculture. We've got a research system on the farm. We just use a machinery shed and we grow about 50 tonne of barramundi and Murray cod annually. And we mostly do that for the live market, for our Asian market, for the live fish, and they're good, healthy live fish. And then we use that water then to irrigate our crops. Once we sort of got a bit of a hold on that took us about 2011 we launched that. And once we got that under control in 2013, we decided to start using the paddocks that we would normally just run some cattle on. And we run chicken caravans up there now, producing what we call pasture-raised eggs and chicken. So our chicken is like an old, something your grandma would have grown on the farm. It's a slow-growing chicken. And what we're trying to do is produce good food that's grown more naturally.
It sounds amazing. How easy or otherwise did you find it to move from old-fashioned, if you like, straight farming to these more diverse areas?
Well, I tell people, they say, what got you into aquaculture? And I said it was really a momentary act of insanity because we knew nothing about fish at all. And I suppose we thought it was going to be very easy. And looking back now, if I'd known the struggles that we were going through, I probably would never have done it because we became worse than dairy farmers. We can't leave the property and be more than 10 minutes away. Otherwise, if the power goes out, there could be $500,000 worth of fish that die within about 10 or 15 minutes. So it's not been easy. We've had really no one to show us what to do, so we've learnt just the hard way. by our mistakes. And people say you're not a fish farmer unless you kill a lot of fish, and that's exactly what we've done.
As I mentioned, you set up, or you're part of this body, Agri-tourism Queensland. What was the purpose of doing that then?
Well, Kate Tomarup actually spoke to me from Tomarup Dairies, and she said about wanting to make it easier for us farmers to diversify and to get into agri-tourism. It's been like, that wasn't our aim when we first started doing it. Like, my husband would come home and he would say, I just literally can't get any work done because people are just walking in all the time and saying, oh, we heard you grow fish in the Lockie Valley and chickens, can we come and have a look? So that's the reason why we started doing agri-tourism. But what we found was that the road that we were going down, even with just diversifying and doing the fish and the chickens on a farm, there was so much red tape involved with it. And I think I'm very stubborn, but I think the normal person would probably give up after the first few knockbacks, but we just kept on going and going. But it's been costly and it's been stressful. So when Kay talked about Agri-tourism Queensland, I jumped at the chance because I'd like to make it easier for farmers to have a little bit of extra cash flow coming through to ride out those difficult times, and even just to showcase what they're doing on their properties, to connect that city-country connection.
And what are people that come and visit your farm now as tourists or stay over, perhaps try your produce, what's the sort of feedback you get?
Look, when people come out to the property, they can't actually believe that we're doing what we're doing, especially with the fish, and that we can grow such beautiful fish on the property. So it's a lot of training for them to see and showcasing what we do. I think it opens their eyes to how we live our life, and people are wanting to know, and they want to know a farmer and they want to know how we survive and what we do. So opening up our doors to make that connection can only be a good thing to get people on board to help support their local farmers.
And I guess the key question, Bronwyn, is, are your kids now interested? Are they going to be on the farm for the next generation?
Well, one of our sons is on the farm with us, and he's got 3 sons of his own now. So the eldest boy's a solicitor. He said to me when I said that we were going to do pasture-raised chickens, he said, Mum, I'm not plucking any chickens, because that's what we made them do when they were little.
Listen,
but it would be nice to see when we get to a stage, and if any of the other kids want to come back onto the farm, that would be great. But we will be leaving this farm in a better place than when we started, and have something positive for our children to take over.
Well, it's been amazing to hear your journey, Bronwyn. Thank you very much for telling us about it. And don't stop watching Landline. It's great.
That's right. I get really good ideas from there.
Absolutely. Bronwyn, thanks very much.
Thanks, Lorna.
The Northern Territory Police Force has welcomed its newest recruits, rookie police puppies, which will soon embark on some rough training. Chosen for their bloodlines and genetics, it's hoped they'll graduate as fully operational patrol dogs to work in crime prevention and search and rescue operations.
Meet the newest furry heroes of NT Police's Canine Unit. 13-week-old pups embarking on a rigorous 18-month training program, all hoping to graduate as fully operational patrol dogs.
We have Doots, Yanko and Coote. They're boisterous little fellas and very, very playful.
The new recruits are part of the Territory's biggest ever intake, with 8 new puppies coming on board this year. On the other end, Axe and Jax are ready to graduate and start their careers in Alice Springs. All pups are put through their paces for the big job ahead, working as human odour detectors that will help track down offenders and find missing people.
The worst situation is an armed offender that they'll have to deal with. A lot of rewarding jobs that the dogs will do, like finding people that are lost.
Proving indispensable in fighting crime, canine roles are rapidly on the rise.
Last week we had another stolen cars leave Darwin and we tracked them through Marlowe's Lagoon. That was a significant track through quite a bit of scrubland. And without those patrol dogs, those persons will not be caught and most likely will continue to commit further crimes or take up significant police resources in trying to track them down afterwards to arrest them.
These puppies are going to have to learn how to sniff me out and track me down in crime situations and emergencies. And while they might not be quite there just yet, it'll be no time at all before they go from playful pups to skilled patrol dogs.
They've definitely got the drive to achieve the end goal. Whether we can focus that enthusiasm to become what we need, that remains to be said, which is probably more an indictment on us than them.
A long and arduous journey for these rookies to make the cut come graduation time. Roxanne Fitzgerald, ABC News.
It is time for us to catch up with the sport. Here's Jared Coote. What's the latest from the swimming?
Yeah, it's been a big meet so far. They've started off the Olympic and Paralympic qualifiers, and I'm joined now by Amanda Shalala, who is at the meet in Brisbane at the Aquatic Centre there. Amanda, thanks so much for your time. Olympic gold medalist Ariarne Titmus, she was the fastest qualifier in the women's 400 metres. No real surprise there. What do you think we can expect in tonight's final?
Well, I think she'll go faster, Jared, that's for sure. She swam 4:01 this morning, and she said that was actually pretty good for her for a heat swim especially, but she is expected to shave a few more seconds off tonight. She will be the favourite for this event as well. She is the reigning Olympic champion in the 400 free and the world record holder as well. The main challenger for her will be Lani Pallister, who was several seconds slower, so we should expect Titmus to finish in one. Of course, the top two in each event will qualify directly for the Paris Olympics and Paralympics, pending meeting the qualification time. So Titmus could get things off to a red-hot start tonight.
Yeah, looking forward to that. What about the men's race? How's that one shaping up?
This one's really exciting, the men's 400 metres freestyle. Australia has a fantastic history in this event with multiple gold medalists, and it could well continue in Paris. We have Elijah Winnington, who is the 2022 world champion in this event, and Sam Short, who's the 2023 world champion in the event. Winnington had the faster qualifying time this morning, with Short also winning his heat, but he was a few seconds slower. So both of them will go head-to-head to battle it out, and we would expect them to finish 1 and 2 to get through to Paris, and then they would be very strong gold medal contenders over at the Olympics.
Absolutely. There was a whole heap of races today. What were some of the other highlights, Amanda?
The men's 100 metres breaststroke was a highlight. Sam Williamson swam a PB, and he came incredibly close to breaking a 15-year-old national record that's been held by Brenton Rickard since 2009. So he'll be hoping to swim even faster tonight and collect a national title, a ticket to Paris, and maybe a national record as well. Australia's most successful Olympian of all time, Emma McKeon, was also in action today in the women's 100 metre butterfly. She was the fastest qualifier for that event. And Kaylee McEwen was in action in the women's 200 metres individual medley. She was the second fastest qualifier, but she is the Australian record holder in this event. She broke that record this year, so she will be the one to beat.
And these are also, of course, the Paralympic trials. Who should we be looking out for later on tonight?
A couple of big names in action tonight in their respective 400 metre freestyle races. We've got Brendan Hall in the men's, who has been to 4 Paralympic Games, so he's trying to go to his 5th, which would be an amazing feat for a swimmer to have that sort of longevity. So he will be the favourite for tonight after setting the fastest time. Tim Hodge is another contender in that one. And we have Lakeisha Patterson, who has won gold medals in this event twice before the past 2 games. So she's hoping for her 3rd gold in the 400 free in her classification, and will again be the one to watch tonight.
All right, Amanda, thanks so much for your time. Enjoy the races tonight.
Thanks, Jared.
Oh, tell me some AFL news.
Yeah, so we've got the King's birthday match between Collingwood and Melbourne has wrapped up, and Collingwood with a dominant victory there over Melbourne. Pies only lost 1 of their last 7 games now, so a dominant 38-point win for Collingwood. Harvey Harrison dominant in front of goal as well throughout this one. 3 goals for him. So yeah, superb all-round performance from the Pies in front of a huge crowd at the MCG on the King's birthday. So a big result for them as they continue some nice momentum here as we head into the middle stages of the season.
How about the dramatic finish to the French Open for the men?
Yeah, what a match it was. Carlos.
Yeah, very pleased. NBA, who won Game 2 of the finals?
Yeah, so Boston, they've got a 2-0 lead now. Both these games have been in Boston against Dallas. They won 105-98 in this one. This was heading into the fourth quarter, right on the buzzer there. A good momentum boost there for them. They won that third quarter, 29-23, the Celtics. And, yeah, they were just truly dominant. Drew Holiday with 26 points and 11 rebounds. Jason Tatum with 18 points. Luka Doncic had 32 for Dallas, but it wasn't enough. A couple of Aussies on the court too for Dallas. Josh Green had 4 points and Dante Exum chipped in with 3 as well.
You got some surfing news for me?
Yeah, the Surf City event at El Salvador on the World Surf League Tour. John Florence is now .1 in the world. You can see why with tricks like that in 3 to 4 foot waves. He beat Diego Dori in the final. He had 16.33 combined, so an 8.5, a 7.83. He moves to .1 in the world and he's guaranteed a spot in the top 5 event at the end of the season. He had a 10-point ride in the build-up to the final as well, so just been absolutely incredible. And Caroline Marks won the women's event 14.8 to 14.46 over Gabriella Bryan. She's now #2 in the world, the defending champion.
And what a lot of sports news you've got, because the Cricket World Cup as well.
Doesn't stop. We've got India beating Pakistan by 6 runs in New York as well at the T20 World Cup. India posted 119. Pakistan could only manage 7 for 113 in response. Jasprit Bumrah with 3 wickets for 14 runs. So India now 2 wins from 2 matches. Pakistan 0-2 after, of course, losing to the USA as well.
From sport to weather, here's Eleni Roussos.
Beneath all of this cloud in the south, we have a cold front moving east across the continent this week, bringing a blast of cold and windy weather to southern states. Across the northern half, skies are clear and should stay that way all week. The cold front will push strong northwesterly winds as it moves across the south from tomorrow. There are wind warnings also in place for several states, with the system clearing out on Wednesday. Tomorrow's forecast in Queensland staying dry and mostly sunny across the state. Temperatures will also be below average. Brisbane headed for a top of 23 degrees. In New South Wales, showers developing across the southern and central ranges. Strong winds through the southeast. 19 the top for Sydney, a cold day in Canberra reaching just 12 degrees. Showers for much of Victoria, rain in the northeast and central ranges, possible storms in the south as well. Melbourne headed for a top of 16. Showers across Tasmania, possible storms about the north and west coasts. Hobart, you're looking at a top of 15. In South Australia, showers about the southern agricultural area, gusty storms in the lower southeast, a top of 19 degrees for you, Adelaide. In WA, scattered showers through the southwest. Winds will also ease in the south and the centre, a top of 21 for Perth. And up top, staying dry and sunny, Darwin headed for a top of 31 degrees.
Eleni, thanks very much. That is the latest from ABC News for now. I'm Lorna Dunkley. Stay with us. I'll be back in just a few minutes. We'll have the latest from the Australian Olympic and Paralympic swimming trials. They're being held this evening in Brisbane. The men's and women's 400-metre freestyle headlining the opening night of the finals at that meet. And Olympic gold medalist Ariarne Titmus was the fastest qualifier in the women's 400 metres. We will see how she gets on and the rest of them as we cross live to the pool in the next hour of ABC News. Do stay with us.
Go straight to the source, ABC News.